All right, we are back for episode number 2 of the podcast. We have Nate Zelinsky with us again. Thanks for coming on again and chatting with us. Had a really good, successful first podcast, so we figured let's do it again.
I like it.
So this time, we want to talk a little bit about Nate, the man, the myth, the legend. So Nate, let's talk. Who are you? Where'd you come from? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, man.
Your elevator pitch.
I like it. Nate Zelinsky, born and raised in Colorado. I'm a native. Left for a short period of time. Lived in Minnesota, but never claimed residency. So I'm officially a Colorado native, which there's not a lot of them anymore. I don't think.
Absolutely, not very many.
So man, I'm a guy that's just chased his dream. You know what I mean? And I, without getting cheesy on it or corny on it, I tell people that all the time. Like, whatever you want in life, you can make it happen. So 7 years old, wanted to become a fishing guide. Went to working at a bait shop as a young kid, and then literally started my career as like in the fishing and hunting world both at like the age of 17. Getting ready to graduate high school, started doing some stuff with an outfitter here in Colorado. And I actually started as a hunting guide before a fishing guide, just because I was able to do that. Graduated college and immediately went in there. So at 17 years old in the state of Colorado, you can't get a guide license.
Really?
I worked for some people, but yeah. So I had to turn 18 before I get a guide license. Started guiding big game at the age of 18, which was crazy. High end hunts.
That is.
Nobody trusting you.
Well, that's the thing. That's exactly what I would have thought.
I mean, I remember sitting in camp. These guys are paying $6-7 grand for an elk hunt, and they would say, "Hey, you're with this guy," and they'd be like, "Him." You know what I mean? And they were like, "You can't buy us a pack of smokes." How are you?
Exactly.
So you had to prove yourself. So it made you work that much harder.
Absolutely.
Then started guiding fishing trips, it was going great. And then crazy scenario, what brought me to like my tournament career, which opened up everything, TV, radio, and everything after that. It was really tournament fishing that got me out of like my shell. On a fun trip to South Dakota with best friend and dad, and I was fishing a Monarch boat made by Starcraft, and pounding waves, right? Everybody left South Dakota waters, and I'm like, we can fish it, right?
Yeah.
Beat the heck out of the boat, and it was a walk-through windshield, and all of a sudden the windshield fell towards us, like fell through, and we're like, like I've blown a million windshields out of boats, but I've never had one just like fall through, so I'm like, I didn't even think about it at the time, right? So we push through, and the whole boat's like becoming rattly. We get to shore, and like nothing's right. So I hooked the ratchet strap on to tie it down. And as I ratchet strap, like I felt like the boat got wider, and I'm like, "What's going on?" So we started looking at it, and we broke all the welds on the beam, basically. So the under hull was still intact, but the walls and the gunnels were not attached to the frame. So you could stand on both sides of the boat and like stretch it like an inch.
Oh my goodness.
So I took it into Marine Sports West in northern Colorado, which was like, I was living in Loveland at the time.
Yep.
They were a big Lund dealer, but they were with Brunswick. They could work on that stuff. And, whatever. I was going through the battle of like a warranty type thing, right? Without, getting too much into that.
Exactly.
Either way, a Lund rep was in there, and he was like, "Oh, that wouldn't happen in a Lund." And I was like, yeah, like whatever. He's like, "Man, we should get you into a Pro V." And I'm like, dude, I'm 20-something years old, 22 years old.
Who has the cash?
I mean, that's it. I'm a fishing guy. Like, that's like I barely got through high school. Like, I'm just not in a point in my life. And, met the dude, the rep, and we were joking around. And that was about the end of the conversation. And I'm going through trying to battle with this warranty and get a new boat and everything. And like 2 weeks later, this guy calls me and he goes, "Hey, man, he's been following up on you." He goes, "I think you would be great Lund material." And I'm like, "Dude, I told you." And he goes, "No." He goes, "Let's talk about like a pro staff, a major contract." He sent it to me, and I called him back. I was like, "Hey, I don't qualify for any of this stuff." He goes, "You're ready to." He goes, "It's time." So that was back when tournaments were hard to get like into.
Absolutely.
So he basically offered me like the highest level sponsorship with Lund, got me into Mercury, got me into all that kind of stuff. And at that point, I had only fished in one tournament in my life.
No way.
Bobby Hicks, who used to own All Pro like Fishing Sport or whatever, the tackle shop off Santa Fe.
Yeah.
He had a tournament partner for like the CWA back when it was huge, 200 boats, or whatever, 100 boats, whatever it was. There was a tournament in like southern Colorado, and his tournament partner got sick, and he was like, "Nate, can you come fill in?" So I fished a tournament. Like I showed up, I fished 2 days, and I went home. And that had been the only tournament. And the next tournament I fished was on a pro level event.
Wow.
So I fished multiple like Governor's Cups, kind of the tail end of PWT. But the first really series I joined was the MWC. But either way, so I went from a fishing guide to full-blown traveling as a tournament pro, 6-7 events a year, gone 100 days a year type thing, and fishing just tournament after tournament after tournament. And then that's really what led into, writing and TV and getting more involved in radio and events and seminars and just all that kind of stuff. So it all kind of blew up at that. And I tournament fished for, a handful of years, 4 or 5 years. And basically when the economy started kind of go downhill in 2010, is when I finally had gained enough sponsors that a lot of the sponsors that were paying the bills came to me and were like, hey, we love the tournament. There's not that much TV in the tournament. We would rather you focus on retail. We'd rather you travel around to sport shows. So I think my first major winter, I think I went to 17 sport shows, like talking on tanks.
Wow.
I mean, Chicago, I did 2 or 3 events in Pennsylvania. I did the Harrisburg show for like 9 or 11 days. I started bouncing around. I started doing retailers. And that's when I kind of slowed down on tournaments. But it wasn't, I would have loved to stayed at that tournament career. It's more at the time, again, being broke, like whatever your sponsors wanted, that's what you did. So that's kind of when I slowed down on tournaments and started doing more retail and focus on everything else, brand engagement.
Yeah, absolutely.
So and then it leads me to what we do now, which we're, now we, instead of fishing the events, now we own the events and run the events and kind of do everything.
Feels good, huh?
So
be in charge of your life.
Right?
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I think like, there's a lot of people watching, right? Like pro fishing is a dream for people,
Absolutely.
Right? But like, I think it's more a maybe fantastical dream where like people think that it's all this like glory, but you talk about it all the time because I've been like, hey, we need to go fish some tournaments, and you're like, dude, I need to know that you can operate on 0 sleep, which is not me. I'm the guy that sleeps in. I can't handle it. Nate is a beast. He's up early. He's always getting things done. Sleeps in his truck when he has to. Let's talk a little bit about pro life for a minute. Like, what was that like? I want to hear your first fishing tournament, like your nerves and like shaking. I want to hear it all, but I also want to know, like, after you get into the grind, what's going through your mind when you're trying to catch fish?
Yeah, I number one, I had no idea what it was, right? Like, not even a clue. For the good and for the bad, but I got the whole new tournament rig, this and that, and like I went into it equipped. I mean, I was top of my game here in like Colorado, right? So I went into a tournament, I'm carrying like 40 rods and I got like 50 tackle trays, and I'm like, I am good, and my first event was on in Spring Valley, Illinois, on the Illinois River for an MWC. Was one of my first events. And like the one day where I found the biggest saugers in the system, in one drift, you would lose 20 jig heads, right?
Yep.
So the guys that were on it would have 10 jigging rods, and you would just snap one off, drop it, get the next one, and you would just try to power fish, and then you'd retie on the way back up. So like I had 4 jigging rods, and I thought I was on it, and I'm like, I don't have enough. And then I lost every jig head I owned in the first 2 hours, and I'm like, I don't have enough gear. And then you fast forward to some of the events I've lost where there's days where you would literally lose 50 and 100 crankbaits a day in trees. Wow. To where it's not even fathomable for like the average fisherman. So, like you're in there and you're like, what do I do? But if you don't do that, you don't compete. So either way, like, I mean, even in my pre-fish, I'm like, I just don't have enough gear, so I'm working through that. And then, like, the nerves started to hit me. So my dad flew out to pre-fish with me in a couple of days. So I pre-fished like 7 days. So I fished with buddies. And I remember I was so nervous one day I unhooked the boat at the hotel, and I didn't unplug my electrical. So, like, the boat's a week old, and I drove off and gutted all the wires out of my boat. Right? So I'm, like, trying to find a place to repair. I'm just a mess.
Yeah.
Fast forward, caught some fish, finally feeling good. And there's, like, 225 boats in this first tournament. Yeah. So I'm lined up. I'm boat 68 going into this thing, and I'm sitting there, and Keith Cavias, who now is a great friend, at the time I grew up watching him on TV. Like, he was the dude that I was like, he's the guy to look up to, right? And he's 2 boats ahead of me, right? So I'm sitting there, and I'm like, the dude I just grew up watching on TV, like reading the PWT articles and in Fisherman 4, he's right there. Like, I'm competing against him. Like, he is no longer
the man
this,
at the time.
Figment of my imagination that I've looked up to as a hero. Like, and then right behind me is Tommy Scarless, and I'm looking through, and this is back when, like, all the greats were fishing MWC. So I'm sitting there, and I puked. right? So I like hang my head over the boat. I'm just like I couldn't like
literally
nerves.
Shocked.
Just like I got to get it together.
Yeah.
And to this day, I'm still like my tournament was always won or lost with nerves.
Yep.
I can't tell you on 2 to 3 day tournaments how many times I've been in the top 10 on day 1 and ended middle of the pack on day 2 because I couldn't handle the nerves.
Right.
It's one of those things that I still struggle to control. So either way, first event, got through it, right? Caught some fish, but then just steadily got better and better. But the eye-opening change is what goes into it. The mental aspect of the people not talking and the people overly talking and what you believe. Yep. You know what I mean? Spreading the rumors of baits, retying your rods and letting people get little glimpses of baits at the boat dock that are fake.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Where you're like just a part of the game.
Yeah.
And then so much of it that I never realized was how much are teams in a legal fashion. So in a tournament, you are your boat, whether it's a team event or a pro-am, you're in your boat, you're fishing, you're responsible for you. But, I would say of all the anglers out there, the top 20 placing people are all a part of a team, right? So these guys are in 2, 3, 4, 5 boat groups, and they share everything. So one guy's in charge of finance, right? So he books the hotels. He pays for meals. He pays for entry fees. Everybody takes their winnings, puts it in a pot, and then you divide it up. You know what I mean? So some of these teams that are really efficient, it's a business. So like on the Spring Valley, Illinois, it's 28 miles of river that you can fish from, like lock to lock. Yeah. And not that that's small, but it's manageable as like a one boat. Right. Next event I went to was Lake Erie, right? So we could fish at that time. You could fish Michigan and Ohio waters because you weren't worried about transferring fish over. So I think we were able to go like 90 something miles. So I'm by myself. And how do you break down? 13 miles of the Detroit River, 7, whatever it is, and 90 miles of the Great Lakes.
And you're not local.
And I'm sitting there and I'm like, and these teams are just crushing because they're just spreading out, getting information, sharing information. Then, they have locals delivering information. And like, it just blew my mind. So I think that was probably the hardest part of it is just realizing how much of a business it is. Yeah. And I mean, everything from, buying enough equipment to playing the mental game to working with teams and, having a system for breaking down the water and, developing relationships of everywhere you go. Fast forward, one of my closest friends is Robert Blosser, who's like a 3-time ring holder angler of the year. He's the best walleye angler out there. And, maybe on like year 3, we started teaming up, right? Yep. He was young in his career. And I started developing a team and it became so much easier. But, these guys show up and they have relationships in every town that has a big body of water. Yep. Every day they're getting resources and information. And, I just didn't realize that was out there. So my first year was a wreck as I learned all this at once, having enough gear, the mental thing, and then just how do you break down bodies of water? So it was rough at first, but looking back, it made me the angler who I am because I developed systems, how to break down water. What do you look for? Your elimination. Number one, how do you eliminate, 90% of what you don't need? Yep. And all that kind of stuff. So it's crazy. And then, like you said, no sleep. There's 2 kinds of tournament anglers out there. And this still exists today. You have your tournament guys that are like, hey, the tournament is from 7 to 3. That's all I care about, so that's what I'm going to learn. And you have anglers that literally pre-fish, 4 or 5 days ahead, and they fish 7 to 3. You have other anglers that are like, I have to figure it out. So they're out there in the dark. They fish sun up to sundown, 13-hour days in summer, on the water, grinding to figure it all out. So, real soon you're like, we pre-fish 5 to 7 days. You're eating, fast food or whatever you can afford, right? You can't afford to go out and buy gourmet. Yeah, so you're eating junk. You're on the water. You're sunburned. You're not sleeping. You're parking your $200,000 tournament rig in ghetto hotels. So there was a lot to it that I just didn't realize. And looking back now, I mean, I didn't go to college, but like my tournament days were like my college days.
Yeah,
it was just
totally. Yeah.
You look back, and you're like, that was. I traveled around fishing the best best walleye waters in the world. And, it was cool, but yeah, it definitely wasn't what I thought it was. And I think that's where a lot of anglers go into it, thinking it's like this fun or this like that, where it's a business and it's a machine, and you have to place. And so many anglers go in to win, but the goal of a true tournament angler is just to be a consistency throughout the course of it.
Right.
You just have to consistently do well.
Right. And I'm sure, this is true for I think any sport, but when you're not producing, you're not making money at it, it's tough. It doesn't matter how many sponsors you have.
That's it.
It's hard, know. And I mean, it's the same thing. Football players, they're not scoring touchdowns. They're sitting the sideline. I mean, they still got to pay for all that stuff that they
100%
they bought into.
And that's and I think so much of it too is like you don't do good and you have your first sponsor call, right? We're like, hey, how'd you do?
Yep.
And you're like, well, you're trying to fluff it the best you can, but you're just like, hey, I didn't produce.
Fluff and buff, yes.
I mean, there's a lot to it.
Absolutely. No, that's cool. I would love to hear more about that, but I've got a couple other topics that I want to dive into as well. So we talked a little bit about kind of the MWC and everything, and then after you got done with that, you kind of full-blown transitioned into the retail, and then now you're guiding. You're doing a whole bunch of content for a lot of different companies. Yep. Let's talk a little bit about like that transition and what you're doing now, and just kind of catch up on who Nate is today as an angler fisherman.
Yeah, so I mean, we started off as I talked about guiding hunts. I ended up guiding big game hunts in Steamboat for 10 years. So I would literally move up to Steamboat Springs in August, and I would come home in like December. So I was pretty much living there, coming off on an off day here and there. Unfortunately, I was the last man of an incredible team for what was called Eagle Spirit Outfitters. So I was the rookie for 10 years. I was the last guy hired of a 7-person team type deal. Sure. So I was in charge of airport runs and all the stuff that came with it. The garbage. So it was a grind. So I did that. So when I wrapped up tournament fishing was the same year I pretty much wrapped up big game guiding. So I went from tournament fishing in the summer, guiding here and there, big game hunting to kind of dropping both of those. So I hit the guide kind of side hard. I mean, those first couple of years, I was doing like 330 days a year on the water. My all-time record, wow. I did 59 guide trips in May one year. So I doubled.
That's 2 days.
Almost the whole month.
Yeah.
Made great money, but like, I mean, equipment is not made to do that. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, if you ever walked up and my stuff was like, if I had all gear working and lights on a trailer, it was like a miracle, right?
Right.
I mean, you just constantly had mechanical failures and this and that. So, but I grinded. So I did several years of that. And then kind of started getting a little bit more, content and more engagement with the partners. And then just kind of slowly started, doing different things. And at one point, 10 years ago, I got into a situation where I was starting to consult for a bunch of towns. So ice fishing tournaments were blowing up, but the foul play in tournaments was blowing up, right? Yeah. So they're catching guys cheating at all events, and it was everything from like full-blown bringing fish in, like dirty, to minor things of like illegal bait, live minnows, chumming,
small things,
small teams working together, so whatever, whether it was, meant to be innocent or hardcore, foul play is foul play, but all this was coming. So a bunch of towns came to me and said, hey, we'd like to help you, fix our tournament. Or like I worked with the town of Evergreen. They're like, we want to have our own tournament on Evergreen for a couple of years. So I started to consult with tournaments, developed a lot of cool stuff. And at one point I sat back and I was like, these ideas are awesome. Like, I'm not going to lie. Like, this is cool. So I started what's called Ice Addiction. So it was cool. And I took little bits and pieces from tournaments I learned all across the country. There was a small stint we kind of blew past in like the early 2000s. I lived in like Minnesota for 18-20 months, like in between tournaments and guiding.
Sure.
So I fished a lot of winter tournaments there, and that's where I kind of developed all the stuff where I fished major two-man tournaments to, the JC Ice Extravaganza and all these. And that's where I fished 15 different style tournaments. And that's where when I started consulting, I was like, here's the stuff that I saw that was cool and stuff that does not work. And that's where we kind of put that in play. And then, 10 years ago, we started Ice Addiction, and it blew up and turned into a really cool tournament series. And then we started doing our ice fishing school, which is awesome. I'm actually going to try to really bring that back stronger than ever this coming year. It's 3 hours, like a classroom environment, 4 hours on the ice, just teaching people what they need to know about species specifics, when ice fishing.
Yeah.
So we started doing that, and then we have our open water series. We used to have individual series, and now we put them all under the name Catch Rate. So we run 4 species at once. So yeah, we're just doing a little bit of everything. And honestly, I'd say anything, we're trying to keep up with the flows. I mean, just like social media changes and marketing changes, we listen to our anglers. So so many companies are a company just for tournament fishing,
right?
Or they're part of the DNR agency, and they're hard to change. I get it when it's like a business like that. I mean, this is us. We're small, so if anglers are like, hey, we'd rather do this. I'm like, I can provide that for you. Yeah. So we try to adapt and change what anglers want and what they do. We strive our business around it and just try to make something to where the anglers want to attend and want to fish.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the event side.
I think the ice school is pretty cool too, because a lot of us anglers, before we got into ice fishing, we just fished when it was nice out.
Yep.
Because it's like, okay, there's open water, we can go cast a line, but knew nothing about ice fishing.
Yep.
But like the guys that are born and bred in Canada and Minnesota, they have no choice. Like their lakes are frozen most of the year. Like it's a little different here in Colorado, but the ice school is cool because I think a lot of people around here don't necessarily have what tools or tactics might be needed. But what I didn't realize when I got into ice fishing is you don't need much. I mean, an auger and maybe an ice rod and some jigs and stuff, and you can get after a lot of species here in Colorado.
And a lot of you can get by with nothing. Go find an old hole, use an axe to break, whatever. You can make it as ghetto as you want.
Yeah.
But get a hole and fish. And I mean, ice fishing in like Colorado has gone up 20 to 30% a year, and that's why. Right. With boats getting to where you get a really good boat, you're $100,000. Like you can fish without that stuff, but the gear is getting pricey. The gear is getting extensive in open water. Ice, you can still make it basic, and it levels the playing field, right?
Right.
I can't outbuy gear, and you could show up, with nothing, and we can honestly compete.
Right.
Sure, you could have some better graphs and some better stuff, but at the end of the day, the equipment doesn't necessarily give you as much as it does on open water. So
totally.
it levels the playing field, so it's a fun sport.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I wanted to talk about catch rate as well, but to get into catch rate, I want to talk about the first moment we actually had, and I call it a moment because Nate and I didn't know each other at this time, but it's a pretty funny story. So me and my buddy Jordan Minch, good fishing buddy of mine, we were talking, and it was early April, and this is when you were running Walleye Insanity tournaments. And we had talked, and I said, hey man, Jordan, I'm going to pay for your entry fee if you'll just come fish with me. It was going to be brutal cold. It was gnarly weather, and we had these like little John boats, and we were deciding whose we were taking. So we ended up taking Jordan's boat, and we get on the water. It's like sleeting, like freezing rain. There's maybe 30 boats. And we back into the water, and we're like already late, so we're hustling and bustling. And then we realize, like, once the boat's in the water and the trailer's halfway up the ramp, that there is no plug in the boat. And I'm sitting back there. It's a John boat. Like, this thing's gonna fill up in 10 seconds. So I'm scrambling to find the plug. I finally plug it, and I get the plug in, and my hand's frozen cold because the water's still in the 40s. And Nate's just standing on the dock. He's looking at me. He's like, "Are you guys gonna be all right?" Like, that was literally the conversation we had, and I was like, "Oh man, this guy thinks I'm a nut job." And I think a lot of that is fairly true to this day. I have a few screws loose from time to time, but
I forgot all about that.
Man, we got out there, and I mean, we were covered in snow. It was a rough day, but it was a fun little tournament, and that was the first time I met Nate. But beyond the story, I wanted to ask you, what got you into the catch rate thing? Because the concept of it is really cool, right? Like, most people are signing up for a league, like a softball league or a hockey league or whatever. Like, I play hockey and softball myself, or flag football, could be anything. The league idea is awesome because it gives, I think, people an opportunity to fish more events, and also the ones that they have to miss for work or whatever, it feels a little less painful than if you miss a big tournament. But what got you into that?
So we, being like having the love for tournament angling, but not touring on tour anymore, I wanted to kind of keep doing it. So I was like, let's just put a series on, and I fell into the exact same thing that was currently out there. So we had Walleye Insanity, we had Bass Obsession, we had Don't Bass Trash Carp Craze. So we had these tournament series, but they were developed just like everything else, 2-man teams, high end entry fees. And honestly, I was fishing another tournament local here, and it was their biggest tournament of the year. Every year there's a Cherry Creek tournament. And I'm sitting in the parking lot, right? And I fished it with Mandy, and nobody is friendly. And I'm not blaming these guys. Like,
right.
they're going to be listening to this. Like, I'm not being mean. But, like, if you sit there in the parking lot and you look around, like, the lies, oh, yeah, I caught him yesterday. It's just, I'm sitting back and, like, that's tournament fishing to me. So, like, I thrive in that. I like it. But I'm sitting back and I'm like, no wonder tournaments aren't necessarily growing. Like, bass is growing, but all the other ones aren't. And I'm like, this is the most non-friendly environment like in the world. Like, I love it, but it's because I'm a part of it and I can compete. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I got the 21-foot boat. Like, I got all the stuff, so it's not. But like, if you just show up, you are like, nobody here talks to me. Yes. They're all lying. So I was like, I own the series, right? So I am sitting here and I'm like, this is awful. Like, everybody's friendly after the fact, but it's just not. Yeah. So I was like, we need to create a series where like anglers get along, right? Because you see what I mean? You pull up to Chatfield and your bass guys are over here and your walleye guys are, and like, it's like a gang, you know what I mean? So segmented. I'm like, let's do our best to create a series that, they get to know each other. We get it more welcoming to the average person to where whether you are shore angling, a float tube, a kayak, a boat, it's all welcome, right? No more like separation of groups and just to make it nice, So we came into it and we first started catching it, league night forever, and now it's called Catch Rate because it started off just for walleye, but now we're bass, walleye, trout, carp. You have to, it's $20 per species, but our goal was community. Make it a community thing. Joel Seaburn, a great friend, he provides pizza for everybody at the event, so we made it more like a bowling league to where you drop in. There's no registration. You show up, pay your money. We pay it all back type deal, and just to make it to where there was some community, where there's some getting along, to where it's friendly for people to come in. And I know people watching this are like, man, you're a jerk and hate saying that, but it's more just if you sit back and look at some tournaments, it is getting so competitive at all levels. Right. Whether you are a full-time pro at the Bassmaster Classic or the regional local event, so we just wanted to make something different, and it's a ball. We really look forward to it. I mean, my kids come down me, they help me run it. It's a good time.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. I've been to plenty of those events. Yep. I try to fish them as much as I can, and it's just a good time. I remember the first one I ever fished, there's like 60 boats stacked in the North Boat Ramp at Chatfield, and we all start taking off. And it was kind of, that like we're playing music and everybody's chatting and good luck and whatever. And I remember the lead boat is just this guy. He's in like a 16-foot, and he's got a way bigger motor than should have been on there. And he comes out of the gun, and I'm not going to do it justice, but he's like, let's go! And he's standing on the bow of his boat while his buddy's hitting the throttle, and his boat's just getting crashed by all these waves from all the other boats. And it's just like that. For that instant, I was like, this is cool. Like, this is like I'm playing with my hockey buddies, having a beer in the locker room. Like, these are sweet guys. So anyway, that's awesome that you've created that, and I know we're all looking forward to it this year. Let's talk just briefly. We talked about this on the last episode, but what cool things did you implement this year for Catch Rate?
So Catch Rate, every event this year has something different, right? So same $20 entry, we're still feeding you, but every event has like a bonus. So the first event is on a Saturday, April 22nd, and there's two bonuses that night. So number one, we want to get more carp guys involved. Well, the carp thing got big when we were running under Don't Bash the Trash Carp Craze. When we switched to Catch Rate, we lost a few of them, so we want to bring them back. So we're really ponying up bonuses. So for that event, we have a $100 bonus from Bass Pro Cabela, so a $100 gift card on top of the first place cash, and that's just like how many people show up. Yep. And then we're also doing a $250 bonus, courtesy of actually a local trash provider in Denver. So first place is the cash involved, plus $250 cash, plus a $100 bonus. So that's awesome. And then on the walleye side, I'm going to try to put my money where my mouth is. So on the walleye side, I'm encouraging everybody to come out. I'm going to fish the event. So it's not complicated, and it is complicated. Right. So walleye's going to show up, right? So however many anglers we have will determine what the payout is. So at the end of the night, we'll have a first place winner, right? Right. And it goes by length, so longest single fish. I'm going to fish at that event. It also goes into the evening that night because obviously spring walleye is a later deal. So it's awesome timing for that event. But if they beat me, so if first place catches a fish bigger than me, I'm giving them $250 of my own cash, of my own money.
Hit them where it hurts. hurts.
If they don't beat me, if I win, nothing happens. They're still a first place winner. Sure. They still take that. They just don't get the $250 bonus. Sure. So yeah, just exciting. I've been talking about doing it for a couple of years. I just haven't been able to do it.
That's cool.
I have a great person coming to help me that night, run the event. So somebody else will be running it. So I'll just be able to fish and get to be out there with everybody. I'm excited about it. So it'll be my first catch rate event that I get to fish. So I'm excited about it. I think I have a strategy. It's obviously a long ways away, but I have a strategy built, and we'll see if it comes true.
Good deal. Well, yeah, we're looking forward to that.
From that point on, we have bonuses for Trout Night, bonuses for we have an awesome event for JJ Branson, who I can't say enough about. Just like an outstanding human being, right? So a good dude. Everybody loved him. He was the guy that you could be having your worst day, and he would walk up and give you a hug, and your day was just lifted. Unfortunately, he's not with us anymore. So we're naming that bass event after him. So the Denver Bass Masters is getting heavily involved that day, which is the club he worked with. We have a $250 bonus that day. So that one, JJ won an event a couple years ago, and his biggest bass was 18 and a quarter. So if you beat the 18 and a quarter, so you beat JJ's fish, we have that $250 bonus. But we have something every night. I'm going to fish carp against guys in August. So all the carp guys, same thing. Beat me, get $250 cash. So we have that going on. We have a couple tailgating parties that I haven't talked about yet. So we're going to have some tailgate meet and greets. So something cool every night at Catch Rate this year.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I'm actually excited to see you out there fishing because as a guy who creeps some of the forums online, some people call you out, Nate.
Oh yeah, we're gonna do it.
Yeah, you're gonna put the money down on the line. So yeah, if you've been one of those guys, we're watching you that have been calling them out.
Try it.
Come out there and see if you can get after it. But you mentioned earlier you're gonna have somebody come help you at Catch Rate. I know a huge part of your life is people helping you out. You can't do this operation alone. You got a lot of people around you, but some people that are especially important to you, your family. So I want to talk. You have your wife, Mandy, and then you have your two kids, Lane and Lauren. And, I just wanted to talk. How did you meet Mandy? What do you guys do as a family? Yeah. What do you guys do outside? Because your family travels with you to ice addictions. Yep. Your kids are involved. I mean, this is a Zelinsky operation here is what this is.
Absolutely. It's a crazy life that we live. So, right, we do stuff on the professional hunting side, the fishing side. It's like we run 4 businesses on the day-to-day between, endorsements and guiding and, events and everything that we do. So it's 24/7. And as much as I wish I could kind of leave it, at the office type thing and go home, it's with us 24/7, right? So, we're sleeping and we're thinking about the stuff. So the family has to be involved. Otherwise, it'd be pretty hard on that. Involved all the time. So, 8 million years ago, I guided a fishing trip with an awesome couple that lived in Denver. Her name was Jody. She was a nurse. The husband was James. We fished walleyes, and from that point on, they fished a couple times a year with me, right? So this Jody who worked at a hospital started spreading the word at the hospital about this great fishing guide, which is me. And she got like all the other nurses to start coming on guide trips. One of those was this lady named Claire who booked a trip for her husband, who happened to be like a major big game hunter and fisherman from he guides in Alaska,
right?
And everybody was like, you should not book a trip for him. This is like getting a guide trip for a guide. Like, this is not a good idea.
Yes.
So either way, she surprised him with the trip. He and his buddies came out, and they were hard at first, So they booked the trip, and they were like, "What are you going to show us that we don't know?" And one of the guys was from Minnesota came on the trip, and so I was just like, I had my work cut out for me. So I worked a little extra hard and impressed him. And from then, this gentleman named Dean, we hit it off and became great friends. Yep. So friends for several years, and all of a sudden, Dean was like, "Oh, I have a couple daughters." I was like, "Oh, that's cool." No big deal. They were younger than me, so I was like, "Yeah, whatever." And you fast forward and just created a great relationship with Dean and his wife, and then his daughters, and things move on and years down the road, and I eventually married one of Dean's daughters named Mandy.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I was actually just in Nate's house, and he has a little invite to his wedding, and it kind of alludes to the fact like you shouldn't let your friends date your daughters, or else you're going to send an invite like this. So pretty funny. I had to include that in here, but that's awesome. Mandy is absolutely one of the best people that I've met, and you guys are a great power couple. You guys complement each other well, so I'm happy for you. What do you guys do as a family? Like, I know fishing's huge, right? Even when you're not guiding, I'll call you or you send me a message and be like, "Yeah, I got the family out, we're fishing or we're shooting or whatever it is." What do you guys like to do beyond fishing? And
I think that we're so consumed with it. It's crazy. So, my kids have a love for both fishing and hunting as strong as I do or did. So much of it has turned into work for me. I'm just now going through that process of trying to learn to spend more time with the kids on it, because I'm on the water in the field literally every day. So every day is fishing or hunting for me. And I get off of work or I get home and the kids are like, let's go. And I'm like, I just came from there,
Yes.
So they love it. So I'm trying to actually spend more time on the water with them because the family wants to get out there more.
Awesome.
So, I'm trying to actually reduce the amount of time I guide and all that kind of stuff just to get the kids. I mean, I spend every second with the kids. So it's not like I'm lacking time with them. It's more, I'm trying to get them out in the field more.
Yeah.
Honestly. So they live for that stuff. I take the kids scouting. I think, and they're 9 years old. They've probably been on 12 big game kills.
Awesome.
I mean, so they've been around it all, from elk to deer to, everything. So they come with on every adventure. We homeschool them for that reason so they can come along and do stuff. And,
that's awesome.
So yeah, we travel around and yeah, they're a part of it.
Yeah.
So we love it.
I haven't seen two kids that are so interested in all of your passions as your kids are. And, it's funny because a lot of other states, you could have had your kids shooting animals by now. Yeah. And here in Colorado, we got an age limit. And these kids, man, they are rearing to ready. Go. And they're not quite there yet. But, that's awesome. I think family's a big part of it. And the fact that they're into it is pretty
it's
neat.
Cool. And we're making them kind of, I don't want to say earn it, but, I look back and, they've caught 20-pound Lakers and huge pike, and they've caught 30-inch walleyes each. They've done all this stuff to where I'm sitting back now, and now I'm kind of going in reverse, and I'm like, all right, now you have to do it. So they take hunter safety next month, and I'm making them pretty much do it kind of by themselves. Where so many parents are kind of coaching their kids along. I'm like, hey, you've already had the easy stuff, you've accomplished everything in the state, now you're gonna do it by yourself.
Yeah.
So we're going through it and making them really learn it. And it's they're doing the knot thing and the casting thing and just more learning colors and water. And I'm teaching them all that kind of stuff. So it's really neat to watch them develop their own skills as we kind of go through this process.
Yeah, no, that's sweet. That's awesome. And I know you guys take a lot of trips too, and your trips involve fishing. Last year, I think you guys went on a sturgeon trip.
Yep.
And then you also did a tarpon trip, which was like a dream trip for you.
Yep.
What's kind of next on your target species list there?
Yeah, so tarpon was kind of always that thing. I had been on a couple trips. I had never landed one. Lots of hookups, it was all solo trips. So I was doing stuff by myself, and I never had the right gear. Couldn't chase them down, hooking them from shore, or wrapping around bridges. For a 40th birthday, Manny took me down to Florida. We had a tarpon trip, and it was epic. And then right before that, we did sturgeon. And the sturgeon was probably one of the coolest experiences ever. It was one of those ones that was a bucket list deal, but turned into so much more. Great friend of ours, Jake Hammer. Stallion of a fisherman, right? Probably the best angler I've ever met. Puts me to shame in those type words. And we hit him up, and I'm like, hey, man, we want to do the sturgeon thing. Where do we go? So he's like, here's the gear you need. Here's where you go. Here's the lowdown, do it. So, we went out and we actually hooked up with Jake for a couple hours. He's like, here's where you go, and kind of walked me through it. Then we turned loose. Yep. And that's probably why it was more special. So it took us 3 days before we caught one. But by the end of the trip, we were whacking them. And they were 7 to 11 foot fish, right? So average fish is 9 footers. But the fact that we did it ourselves, that we figured it out, we grinded, it was so neat. It was just Manny and I and the kids, on a desolate river, nobody around, catching 10-foot dinosaurs. It was a really cool trip.
I had the pleasure to edit some of those videos for Nate, and I was watching the footage just in awe of the size of these fish because you just don't understand. And then Nate had a couple pictures. I'll try to put them up here on the podcast, but he had a couple pictures with him in the water with the kids, and it's like, dude, that thing is that's scary. If that's lurking in the water, you're swimming, you're scared.
Big fish.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So, no, that's awesome. That's really cool. So I have to know, who in your family is the stick? Is it still you? Is it still Nate that dominates? Do you have one lucky family member? Because I feel like that's my wife for me.
Absolutely. I think the females are always better for a lot of reasons. they're more sensitive to the touch. Like my wife on the hunting side will outshoot anybody I've ever known.
Yep.
She's fast, so target accusation is there. I have an awesome video of us arguing over the distance of a deer. I'm telling her literally, and you've seen the footage, I'm like, do not shoot. Do not shoot. And she's just adjusting the turret, and I'm like, don't do it. And, she shoots this deer at like 726 yards. And so, I mean, shooting, I would never compare to Mandy. Right. The kids, we've entered them for 3 years in a row in this little fishing derby up by Lake George, and they keep taking turns winning it. Awesome. So they're both, game on it. They're all lucky. So, I would say that, everybody in the family has some talent on the fishing and hunting level.
Yeah, it's in the blood.
The vision of the kids is, impeccable, where they're like, there was one. And I'm like, I don't think so. I argued with Lane on a mule deer hunt last year. So I was like, we're looking for him. He's like, I just saw one over there. And I was like, no, you didn't. And he's like, Dad, please go back. And we sure enough, we hiked back, and there it was, so awesome. It's pretty cool.
That's so fun. Yeah. The first date I went on with Michelle, I took her to Maine Reservoir in downtown Lakewood. I was at Belmar, and it was close, and I'd never fished there before. So I was like, all right, we're going to give this a go. And third cast in, I'm talking with her, telling her all about it, and there we hook up on a 28-inch walleye. And I'm like, I didn't even think this thing would swim in here, but I guess I caught one. And of course, that's not an average for that lake, but just pretty cool that she brought the luck for me. And then every time we fished together, I mean, we went up to Granby a few years later, and I couldn't buy a lake trout bite, and she had caught 6 or 7 by the time I'd finally gotten one. So it's interesting. There's
Their
always
touch is better. There's no ego to get over.
Exactly.
The female's got it figured out.
You're not in your head as much.
Exactly.
Yeah, I feel that. Well, cool. Right on. A couple other things I wanted to talk about here. Let me pull up my notes. I was going to ask you, as far as hunting and fishing go, I think for me in my life, it's bounced back and forth. Okay. I loved fishing when I was a kid. That's all I ever wanted to do. I would take my fishing pole and I'd fish in the gutter outside of my street, right on the driveway, because I would think at least I'm fishing. I know I'm not going to catch anything, but when the water's running by and I've got my lure in there, maybe there's a tiny minnow that'll come by, the kid things you do. But I feel like now I'm more into hunting. I love turkey hunting. I love big game hunting. You've been a big, help in kind of growing my skill set and understanding what I'm looking for. But what would you say at this point in your life? Are you more a fisherman at heart or a hunter at heart?
That's so tough to say because I love them both, I think even this transition of seasons between them, going from ice fishing to open water, and then from open water, from one species to the next, I think you're always ready for that break and always ready for that next species, and same with hunting. So I think it's, depending on what time of year you ask me, towards the tail end of hunting season, you're like, man, I'm ready for ice fishing,
Sure.
I've made them both into a business, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, right? Like take your passion and make it your work. It's awesome. Like that's a goal in life. But then also you're taking away your hobby. You know what I mean? Right. So I the way that I always put it in terms of words is they're both businesses, right?
Right.
Fishing is all public. So everything I do fishing, I feel like you're graded on, right? You're on social media. You have a bad guide trip and everybody's like, oh, I went out with Nate. It was terrible. He doesn't know what he's doing. Or I think, an event, a tournament, I'm 100% in the public eye in the fishing world. So there's a lot of judgment and a lot of tests that you always have to pass.
Right.
In the hunting world, it's myself and the cameraman, right? Yeah. So you see the stuff afterwards, right? So good season, bad season, you see the edited films, you see the pictures of the hunt. Nobody knows what goes into the hunt. You don't see the day-to-day. You don't see the grind. So I will say the hunting is a lot more relaxing for me, just because it's not public the entire time you're doing it. It's a small portion of it that's public. So, you're just not as involved in the public. So I really like that aspect of being able to relax a little bit. Right. You don't have to be on point 24/7 in the hunting world as much. Right. So I like that aspect. I also love the physical aspect of the hunt. At the end of a hunting season, when you're so drained and so beat up, your body feels good. It's like being at the gym every day type deal.
Totally.
But again, the fishing thing, it's more of my business. I'm better at it.
Yeah.
So it's a catch-22 of which one you do more.
Time of year. Yeah. No, I feel that. No, that's awesome. Well, cool, Nate. I really appreciate you giving us some insight into your life here.
I appreciate it.
I wanted to kind of end with just, again, we did a little bit of this last podcast, but what do you have going on? What do you want people to know about? Where are things in terms of, where is Tightline going and ice addiction and what should people know?
Yeah. No, so just excited. I think everything we do, we try to work with the public. We want to do what the public wants to see, wants to partake in, and event-wise wants to, come to. So ice addiction, we have some changes. We're excited about it. We're going to change some timing on it, different prizes, going to mix up the venues a little bit. So typical growth with ice addiction, just do surveys, do studies, figure out what anglers want and adapt to it. Excited about catch rate, the changes that we're implementing this particular year. We're developing basically a Hunt Nate Zelinsky website. So all the content we've done with Bowtech, with Ruger, with Colorado Parks and Wildlife, all my personal hunts, we're going to put them all in one place. So whether the content lives there or it's a link to go somewhere, we're going to organize all the education on hunting that I've done to where it's like a hub for people. So that'll be coming out here at some point this early summer. So excited about that. Really excited to launch a clothing line. So that'll be for all kinds of stuff. Some funny t-shirts, some fun t-shirts, practical gear, all that kind of stuff. So really excited to do some clothing stuff. And then other than that, just being on the water, hunting, fishing, slowly getting better at what we do.
Awesome. That was very cool. Yeah. Well, yeah, we'll definitely keep everybody posted on socials and when you get your website posted up, and excited to see the clothing line. I know it's something that I've been talking about on my channel forever. We have some t-shirts that we're getting ready to put out. So yeah, I think it'll be an exciting time for you and the growth of your business. And
excited about it.
I really appreciate your time today. And we're going to do one more podcast with Nate in a couple of weeks here. We're going to talk a little bit about hunting. We're going to talk about, getting your kids into it, turkeys. We're going to talk application deadline, things like that. By the time the podcast airs, the application deadline will likely be passed. But it's good information to kind of keep in mind for next year and understand also scouting processes and things like that over the summer, because in reality for you, hunting starts now.
It's always, it's year round.
Yeah,
for sure.
You're watching it. So anyway, thanks again for joining the podcast. We really appreciate it. And we'll see y'all next time on another episode of Catching Colorado Podcast. Thanks for watching the video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you're interested in more relatable content, you can check out these videos right here. Oh, and don't forget to like and subscribe down below so you can stay updated on our next adventures.